Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York. Welcome, Senator. You see this school here, McCaffrey Middle School from Galt, California. They're here. They wanted to go see museums. They wanted to see exhibits. They wanted to see what any middle school kid wants to see when they come to Washington, D.C. And they're upset. Their government is not open for them.
They should be. This should not be a day of exultation and happiness. Because look where we ended up, just where we started. We Democrats said three things: open the government, pay our debts, and then we'll negotiate. That's exactly what the agreement calls for, but it took millions of people being hurt, some much more than these school kids.
No, sure.
Families not getting paychecks and so many other things, all because a small group of people thought that they were right to do to hurt anybody they wanted to get their way. And unfortunately, not in the Senate, but in the House, Speaker Boehner for too long went along with them. The hope here, the silver lining in this cloud, is that mainstream conservative Republicans realize that the politics of confrontation, of reckless brinkmanship doesn't work, and we won't go through this on February 7th or on into the year.
Well, I want to talk about brinkmanship because it seemed clear to me when it came to the Senate negotiations last night and this morning between Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell that Democrats did not think that the Republicans had any leverage, that Democrats did not think that they had to give anything to Republicans. I guess there's this provision to make sure that those who get stipends from the government are actually deserving of them because of their income level. But beyond that, there wasn't really a give and take. It was
not.
We're not giving you anything. You have no leverage and you're wrong. Could this not have ended sooner if Democrats had not taken such a hard line?
Well, it was not a hard line on the substantive issues. It was a hard line saying, unless I get my way, I'm going to shut the government down. I'm going to risk default for the nation. Now, anyone can do that. I believe in immigration reform. What if I persuaded my caucus to say I'm going to shut the government down? I'm going to not pay our bills unless I get my way. It's a politics of idiocy, of confrontation, of paralysis. And so finally what happened, Barack Obama and Democrats said, we're not going to give in to this kind of brinksmanship where basically a gun is put to your head.
How much did Obama and Harry Reid have to buck up Democrats?
We were united. We have seen this brinksmanship over and over again, and we realized if we didn't stand up now, we'd be playing the same politics of brinksmanship every quarter. And here is what I believe. I believe that certainly in the Senate and even in the House, the hard right Tea Party group of Republicans has been discredited, not only by the poll numbers, but because they really didn't have a strategy. And once everyone has learned that we Democrats are no longer going to cave to this kind of brinksmanship, they won't try it again. So we'll have a much, much better next year than we did this year.
Tactically, President Obama seemed to be sitting out, at least publicly talking about this. What was going on behind the scenes? How involved was he? Or was Harry Reid really just driving the ship?
No. President Obama, Harry Reid, Democratic leadership, we were all on the same page. We said...
No, but who was in charge of driving?
Well, it was a consensus. No one had to persuade the other. We both came to the conclusion early on that we could no longer cave to this kind of brinksmanship. I'll hurt everybody else unless you give in to me. And so it was easy. And no one blinked at any one point. We knew that if we stood firm, because these Tea Party folks were so out of the mainstream. I love when, Ted Cruz says the American people lost. Well, fewer than 20% of the American people advocate his policy, which is shut the government down, don't pay your debt unless we end Obamacare. Some people want to do that, but not a majority, not even close. And so what's happened here is that this extreme group has finally been stood up to. And now maybe, in an ironic way, Democrats have given mainstream Republicans some of the strength to go forward and negotiate on a reasonable basis where you get something and not everything.
The debt is $17 trillion, and I understand that the annual deficit has gone down, but the debt is still a staggeringly high number. And if you look at projections for future years, with baby boomers retiring and healthcare costs continuing to rise, it's going to get worse. Is this now a time, for whatever reason, whether it's because the Tea Party is so active and they're not going away, but is this now a time for Democrats, Republicans to actually sit down and say, we really need to take this seriously? Okay, we don't approve of the tactics of the Tea Party, but they're right to shine a light on this serious problem of debt.
In all due respect, we've made big progress on the debt. The deficit is about half of what it was several years ago.
Partially because of the sequester, right?
Partially because of the sequester, partially because we raised revenues. We've made progress there. And it is a very important issue. But I'd mention there's another issue which I think is even more important, and that is that middle-class incomes in America are declining. It has never happened. In the last decade it has, and we ought to give as much focus to that as to debt reduction. I am not belittling the importance of debt reduction. I believe in it. But it is not the only issue. And with, again, the peaking of the Tea Party, I think other issues will come into play. For all we know, we may get a good immigration bill now because same thing. Small group of outliers said, I am not going to go for that. And in the past, too many Republicans in the House went along.
So Jay Carney and the White House have used the term ransom. We're not going to pay ransom. We're not going to do anything that the Tea Party wants us to do or the Republicans in the House want us to do just because they're threatening the shutdown. They're threatening
to hurt innocent people.
I understand. My question is, this provision to allow income verification before Obamacare subsidies are granted,
right,
is that not some sort of concession?
No, it is
it's not.
It is no change. There's a report from the Secretary of HHS to see if it's working, but there was verification, we believed in it, in the bill even before these negotiations began. It's, it is, frankly, a bit of a fig leaf, which we were happy to give, but that was not a negotiation.
Why not?
That was not, that was not what Ted Cruz and the others started to demand at the beginning.
And why not take the opportunity also to look at some of the problems with Obamacare that are clearly there and would have been covered a lot more in the last couple of weeks if it were not for this mess? We have serious problems with the website. There are other issues. There are serious questions about restaurateurs and whether or not they're going to have to reduce hours for employees.
Look,
are those not serious concerns?
The president himself has looked at, when you pass such a major law, which in my view will do so much good, there are always going to be changes that have to be made. That happened with Social Security. That happened with Medicare. But we didn't repeal them. We didn't try to find ways to thwart them. We tried to improve them. There will certainly be efforts to continue doing that at both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Final thoughts on the last few weeks?
Well, again, a hope and a prayer. And that is that, when I first got here to the Congress, and even my first several years in the Senate, Democrats and Republicans sat down and negotiated, and we realized we'd have to meet somewhere in the middle. I hope and pray that can be restored. We've had a politics of brinksmanship. Two faults. One, obviously, the Tea Party hardliners. But the real fault lies in too many mainstream conservatives willing or being frightened, frankly, by them. Hopefully those days, they're never going to be over, but that kind of policies are diminished, and we will see much more productive legislating in the next few years.
All right, Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, thank you so much for being